Alexi, this is a real treat for me. I've seen you in the flesh lots over the years, but it's a treat to be talking about something a little more work related. So I think for the viewers who are probably desperate to know who this mysterious man is, maybe you could share a little bit about yourself and your founder journey.
Yeah, no, it's awesome to be here. I think we've had many conversations off air that have touched upon some of these topics. So I'm excited to be able to dive into it and hopefully help share some stuff. Some background about me, trying to keep it short because life stories in a few minutes is often difficult. But the relevant parts are came straight out of university, started my own business. I always knew I wanted to go into business. My granddad came from some mountains in Cyprus and came over when he was 21 on a boat to the UK and was a real entrepreneur and did all sorts of ventures, started as a dish boy and built up a few different businesses. So I was inspired by him. And I was also probably inspired by the fact that I really struggled to find my way at school, like a lot of founders talk about. Worked really hard, but never quite, it just didn't really work for me in terms of the structure and what we're trying to do there. I questioned a lot of stuff that was going on at school. So knew I wanted, as soon as education was done, I wanted to set up my own business. Set up a couple of different ones, really just trying to find my feet in this world and get started and try and make a lot of money, which has changed a little bit over the years. But yeah, one was a clothing brand, one was an Amazon drop shipping business, and one was an electronics accessories brand. I made every single mistake that there is to make, I think, in that, but I learned a huge amount, and I wouldn't be where I am today with those. Again, long story short, I got to a point after 3 or 4 years of running a couple of these businesses with a co-founder where on paper my life looked really good and I thought I should be really happy, and I wasn't. And I would go through these waves of pretty like high highs and low lows, and finally just got to one where I was like, enough's enough. I need to do something about this. And went and confided in my mum, which was always the person I'd go to. And she just said, I think you should probably speak to someone now, like not me, but someone else, a professional. And spoke to a therapist who put me on to a coach because all I wanted to do was talk about business, which is what I've noticed in my coaching, which we'll get onto. But she put me on to someone. He was a coach, successful businessman, and went in, was expecting the worst, and to be completely honest, changed my life, not in one session, but over the course of the next year or two, working with this particular guy called Ricky, who just asked me all the questions that I needed to be asked, and understood. And I think this will lead nicely into, what founders can do for, their mental health or their mindset, etc. But ultimately, it was really understanding myself, what I wanted, why I was running these businesses, what do I want to achieve, why do I want to achieve that, and really making sure that I had no bullshit answers. Like I needed to be really clear on what it was. And he helped me maneuver my into a new business, to be honest, and now started a podcast interviewing founders and other high performers on their mental health. That led me to realize that coaching was helping a lot of people with all types of mental health issues, and also the performance side of things. And now, so for the last 3 or so years, I've been coaching founders one-to-one, helping people who I find so interesting. And I know that, again, why I coach founders is because founders can move the needle more than anyone else. They can create the impact that I'm really attracted to. And I find them fascinating beings. And I think they're also very under-supported. And whilst we call them high performers, they've never had any coaching. So there was kind of like a aha moment there, which was like, these people are really high top performers and no one gets any leadership coaching. No one gets any performance coaching. No one gets any teaching of any of that. when you're younger. So that's kind of why I'm here today and speaking to you.
I recall fairly distinctly actually a conversation you and I were in Montreal, and just the words changed my life. We've both been really tremendous beneficiaries of coaching. With your coach Ricky, my coach Nat. Shout out to Nat. It's and again, I think both of us had a fairly similar perspective that this was going to be kind of like business therapy, and it's certainly not that. Can you talk about your evolution from sort of player being coached to player coach, and some of the first things that you observed you thought maybe you could scale to other people?
Mm. Yeah. So being coached, I think every coach needs a coach, which is the first start. It's not about like I think we see that there's some sort of guru at the top that's worked everything out and that needs and therefore can coach everyone else. And it's not that. Like I need a coach, my coach needs a coach, I could coach my coach. Like it's kind of more that it's not about one person knows more than the other. It's that allow someone else to look at things from a different angle and ask questions that you may not have asked yourself before and bring up new perspectives. And that was a huge moment for me, was kind of what I alluded to earlier, which is that mental health is mindset and mindset is well-being, and all these things are kind of linked in a way.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas we often look at them as like, okay, what is mental health? I can do this for myself. I can go and do breath work. I can, go for a walk or whatnot. But I think what underpins a lot of people's mental health, or where that mental health is their perspective on life, their perspective on themselves, how they understand themselves, and the world around them. And that is essentially what, for me, becomes mindset. Like, people can have the same lives, exactly the same lives, but they can interpret their life differently to others, to the other person, and they can be having a completely different experience of it.
Oh, I bet that resonates with a lot of
Yeah.
people right now.
Yeah. And I think that for me has been the biggest kind of perspective, again, a perspective shift for me, which is that, like, honestly, you can be doing, and I think this is a good one for founders, because you can be doing a lot of unhealthy things for yourself and for your body, and you will need to at times. I'm not one of these people that's trying to pretend that, you can do 3 hours a day and, leave a lot of thinking time as a young founder. It doesn't work like that. And, yoga's gonna fix you. These are all really useful things, but it's ultimately more about how you're speaking to yourself. How are you talking to yourself on a daily basis? How are you celebrating your wins? How are you observing your losses? How are you learning from all these things? Rather than, I think, what is being, because it's just easy and simple, and for no wrong reasons, but what is being pushed is like, well-being is feeling good and feeling bad. It's like, no, it's not.
All the time. It's feeling calm all the time. It's never feeling stress ever.
Yeah. And that's why, coming back to coaching, it's amazing. Sometimes it's really nice to feel like angry. So you can come into a coaching session, you can be angry and you can let it all out there. It's like, we're not there to say that one emotion is worse or better than the other. It's just that you need to express those emotions in a safe environment, in an area where you feel like you can be yourself and you're not going to be judged.
And so if we can maybe double click on that, can you talk about, maybe there's one, maybe there's three, that when you talk to founders, probably maps to your own experience as well, but the kind of mental traps that you see founders falling into that keep them from, not only just sort of performance optimizing, but like well-being optimizing.
Mm. Yeah, I guess a good place to start, specifically for a lot of my clients, founders, are VC backed, which is relevant for this particular conversation. There is obviously a lot of pressure in terms of growth. and in terms of how you're working, etc. And I think there are a lot of very different scenarios. Every single founder has a different scenario. Even if it seems like it's simple on the surface, you've been VC backed by X, everything is different. So I think the number one is falling into the trap that because you see that some other successful founder has implemented this daily routine or has implemented this particular thing to keep them healthy and sane, it is not going to be the same for you. That does not mean that you can't pick up some amazing tips, but I like to say that interpret everything that you've got, read, take all these things on. However, you are so individual and your company is so individual and so different to others. And where people fall into one of the worst traps is because it can be even more upsetting when you're like, I'm doing everything that this person has told me to do, who is clearly really good and they know and it's worked for them. Why isn't it working for me? There must be something wrong with me. And then as soon as you go into that thinking, oh, to be honest, you're fucked, because you're going to start thinking that there's something wrong with you. And then, you know, all the other things lead from that. Like if you don't have the confidence in yourself and what you're doing and your ability, well, it's not a good situation.
It's actually it's fascinating to hear that founders, because we see businesses all the time that they get some sense of a problem they want to solve. They start to build a technology that solves it, and then they go from being a unique one-of-one company to trying to find what's the best go-to-market strategy, or what's the best operating framework, or what are the best KPIs. And I mean, for a lot of first-time founders or a lot of like first-time scale-up founders, this is the right place to start, but it's not religion. And you just find yourself in a place where you try one set of KPIs or one go-to-market board from a success story, which looks sort of similar to you, and it doesn't work. So then you try another one, and you try another one, and you try another one, and you kind of end up at the same place, which is, oh, my company's the problem. But I hadn't. It makes a lot of sense based on that personality type that you'd have people taking the same approach to kind of like wellness shopping.
Yeah, and productivity is a classic, right? Productivity and performance. How do I perform? How do I get the most out of what I'm doing? And I think health, performance, mental well-being is all very wrapped up kind of in the same thing. And again, it's where I see people getting trapped is like, oh, but this really worked for that person. Like them working 10 hours on the weekends, some people can do it. For example, I'll give a sort of a throwaway is this isn't the same for everyone, but young founders don't tend to burn out in their first few years, right? Why is that? Because they have a certain amount of excitement tolerance, I would call it, to like, these are new things, to putting in the graft, putting in all of this. And ultimately, all of us, again, have different perspectives and different mindsets at the time on what we're expected to do and what we want to do. And so I see that like founders getting caught up, like I'm working the same amount of hours as I was 2 years ago, but I'm feeling awful about it. It's not about quantifying the hours. It's about how you're feeling within those hours and how you're looking at those particular hours, if that makes sense.
No, it does. And are there kind of common, maybe it's frameworks or maybe it's even as simple as practices that you would say these things work? If you were to give somebody a piece of advice on a podcast before doing the deep work, what would it be?
Yeah, well, it's going to sound, I thought about this because I knew this question would probably come up. There are thousands of practical things you can do, right? But I think the majority of people know, even just by going and listening to another podcast with other high performers, how you can get the best out of yourself and how you can still stay healthy. There are loads of information on that. And people can check out my podcast, for example, if they want more tips from people like that. But the thing that I think would benefit, and probably sounds biased because it's because I believe in it, is do the work and do the work on yourself in terms of understanding what you're good at, what you're bad at, what you like, what you don't like, all of these questions that I mentioned early on, which the power that you get from understanding yourself and how you can turn that into being a better performer, feeling really happy, all of these things, whatever it is that you want. That's what I think people are missing at the moment. And that I've used in a coach. It could be a therapist, it could be confiding in someone that you haven't. But I think finding a structured way of doing that and a place where you can work on yourself, could be going on a retreat of some sort. And again, this is going to sound very biased because I'm a coach, I run a retreat. But this is genuinely why I've set these businesses up, is because I believe that this leads to the most amount of progress. I think you can do, and again, it comes back to individuality. What you do with a coach is you break down why these things are working and why they're not, and you make them specific to you and your story and your business and your lifestyle. A lot of people think, that's why the first thing I get when people come in, they think, oh, I thought you were going to tell me all the things I needed to stop doing, like eating gluten and, and all these other things that you were going to tell me I had to do, like, not wake up at 5 a.m. or all this. And people founders get really scared of that because they're like, I want to do that. And that's fine. It's not about one set rule. It's about, okay, you want to be a little less tired. Well, what does that mean? Is that to do with your sleep? Is it to do with what you're eating? Is it to do with actually your mindset and the way that you're looking at the current work that you're doing? There are so many things that could come up, and kind of I see coaching as like not just kind of getting the blanket LinkedIn message. You can really dig into how you can optimize your life or become a better at whatever it is that you want.
Okay, I know this is probably going to be an aggravating follow-up, but I just have to ask it.
Please.
If sort of the self-understanding and the self-work is the place that you really need to start with to build, a kind of a wholesome wellness program around, how do you personally approach that? Is that a exercise with a pad and paper every quarter? Is that a one-time thing and you feel confident on it and you revisit it periodically? What's that starting point look like for you?
Do you mean doing it on my own? Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, on your own.
Yeah.
On your own.
So for myself, it's a good question because not everyone can afford the coaching or feel like that's the right place to start. I think there are a few different avenues, but the number one would be journaling. Like, you can ask yourself those questions to a certain degree. The difference is that we tend to wriggle out of the questions that we don't really want to answer. And that is where a coach can come in. However, you could do that with a partner. You could do it with a friend. You can say, I want you to ask these questions. But I think the first step is journaling these things down yourself. You'll be amazed at how much is figured out. Like the saying is, like, a problem shared is a problem halved. And I think you can even do that in a journal. Once you write, and when you journal, it's really important to just write and not think, am I writing the right stuff? Am I right? Just write, let it flow, and then see what stands out on the page is like, what is a new insight? And you'll be surprised how much comes up. I think there are a lot of other things that can really help. And usually they're around mindfulness, but not just mindfulness in the sense of go and meditate for 10 minutes a day. I think that puts a lot of people off. It could be just that one walk that you do a day where you're not on your phone. I think space away from the business, as counterproductive it sounds, is one of the biggest benefits I see in my clients, because we think, well, like, especially when you're struggling with a problem in your business, you want to keep digging into your business and keep working and working to find it out. How often you just take yourself out of the room, you go somewhere else, you go for a beer, you go for a whatever it is, and go and see an old friend, and suddenly out of nowhere, you kind of like see it from a different perspective, or you realize you've got so in the weeds. But yeah, definitely just journaling on all these things and finding space where you're not distracting yourself with work or with other unhealthy behaviors like social media.
Well, What I feared would happen has happened. I was quite nervous about trying to fit this into 20 minutes, and I knew we were going to have to do a longer conversation. So we will, because
Yeah.
that's the beauty of software. Before
This
you
is the
go, though,
tease, the
yes.
teaser.
Before you go, though, can you just tell the viewers where people can find out more about you? Please plug Numa, plug the podcast. I'm sure people are interested.
Yeah, so you can find me. I am the Conscious Founder on Instagram. I'm just thinking about my creative director is going to be really annoyed because I'm trying to work out where people can actually find me. But you can find me on Instagram. I'm sure you can add it to the notes. Find me on Instagram. Most of what I post though is on LinkedIn as Alexi Pittalis. You can just look me up, add me on there, ask any questions, please get in touch, especially if you're a founder. I love this stuff, as you can probably tell, and I do it every day. So I'm very happy to answer anyone's questions and interact, etc. If they've got any follow-ups to what I've said, and if they want to call me on my bullshit, that's also fun. So yeah, find me there.
All right. Thanks, Alexi. Talk soon.
Thanks, Frazer.